For this presentation, you'll need to be familiar with the following terminology. The bema refers to the judgment of believers which will occur at the rapture. It is the Greek word associated with the judgment seat of Christ. It deals with mythology, which is the doctrine of rewards. Mythologists are experts in the doctrine of rewards. Associate this term with the crown. Many Christians are aware that crowns are one of the possible rewards that may be awarded at the judgment seat of Christ. This is in contradistinction to the great white throne judgment which occurs at the end of the millennium. That judgment deals with soteriology, salvation from eternal damnation in the lake of fire. Associate that term with the lake of fire. God's love, how much can He show? Metaphorical picture of the outer darkness. This is what I think of when I think of the outer darkness. When my son Jeremy was very young, toddler age, crawling across the floor, in living room floor, carpeted floor, he would crawl over to the place where we put our feet or a lampstand or whatever you call that thing, but he would crawl over, pull himself up, crawl up on top of it, sit there, and then flop, he would fall off backwards and hit his head on the floor. And Diane, she tried to break him with that, give him a little swat, my type of thing, and it just would not work. Every single time, crawl across the floor, climb up on the thing, and fall off backwards and hit his head. So, what's a parent to do? After a while, brain damage, I guess, so you don't want that to happen. So, we got a playpen. And we put it there at the opposite end of the living room, longer living room, so you stick him in the playpen. He was no longer free to crawl over up into our arms, and we didn't like it. He didn't like it, and we put him in that playpen the first time. I can still see it. He wanted to get out. Well, that's what I think of when I think of the outer darknesses. That! If you've been unfaithful, you're immature, God's going to put you in the playpen. And we don't like being in the playpen. We like to be able to crawl and roam around. But, the crying never stopped, Jeremy did a much better rendition. He had the actual weeping and gnashing of teeth, just like Jesus talks about. I got this in here on YouTube, and we can relate to that experience. Enough of that already. Okay. But really, it's not going to be an off button in heaven. You get cast into the outer darkness, it's going to be some weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus is there in that place. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I take him quite literally. Some Christians are going to be extremely disappointed and shocked. It's going to blindside so many Christians because they didn't know that outer darkness was possibly pertained to Christians. They just thought it was talking about salvation from hell or something like that. And it's just going to blindside so many, many Christians. That's where most Christians are going to spend eternity. Rewards are eternal. Well, do I think that they were going to be crying like that for eternity? No. But I do believe that there will be eternal regret. And I do think that they will have occasional tears throughout eternity. So I don't know how long it'll be before they calm down and say, okay, I got my toys and my playpen and that type of thing. And they're not in hell, they're in the playpen. And my playpen, it was in the living room. Now, in Scott's model, and we'll get later on, the playpen is in the bedroom. So we got some competing models here. So over the years, he and I have worked on some competing models. The question is, where is the playpen? We do agree that there is a playpen. Then it will come about, because you listen to these judgments and keep and do them, that the Lord your God will keep his covenant with you and his loving kindness, which he swore to your fathers, and he will love you. All right. Because you listen, he will love you. This is mythological love. Yes, mythological love. Love, it occurs at various strata. No surprise there. We've seen everything else occurring at strata. Might as well have love occurring at various strata. So, God loves all of his children equally. Yes, at the soteriological level. But this text says, because you listen, he'll love you. Now, if that text means anything, it's got to mean that there's a special degree of love available to those Christians who listen to God as opposed to those who do not. So, God's love, how much love can he show? Well, there's limits to how much love he can show at this stratum. When we put Jeremy in the playpen, we couldn't show him the same amount of love that we could before. Before, he was able to roam over and get the hug whenever he wanted it and that type of thing. We love that. But once you put him in the playpen, it's hard to hug a kid in the playpen. It's going to be hard for God to hug the kids that put in the playpen like he does the kids that are not in the playpen. So, the moral to the story is stay out of the playpen. There is a better experience of love, a higher degree of love to those Christians who are not put in the playpen. In John 14:21, he who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me shall be loved by me, my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him. There is a higher degree of love that will be expressed to those Christians who love the Lord. So how much love can he show? Because of his promises here, God has limited himself, autonomously limited himself. He cannot show those believers who are not serving him, who are not being faithful, he cannot love them at the same degree that he does other believers relative to the playpen. So, we want to maximize our intimacy with the Lord. That is the highest form of reward. Ruling with Christ, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Flying like Superman, boy, I want to do that. But really, the highest form of love isn't doing all the cool stuff. It's the cool person you get to hang out with. It's intimacy with Jesus. That is the highest reward. Jesus is our reward. So, we want to stay out of the playpen so we can get all the hugs that we possibly can. Everyone's cup will be full of joy, some people say. Do I need to go back and hear the little crying child? I mean, Jesus said there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That child did not sound happy to me. When Jesus says there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, that does not sound like everyone's cup is full of joy. Those casting out of darkness, their cup is not full of joy. There's a lot of holes in this argument. Everyone's cup is not full of joy. There's going to be some who are happier than others, and they are not going to be oblivious. They're not going to say, well, I'm crying, but they're going to be able to tell that you're not crying. And Jesus has wiped away your tears, has not wiped away her tears. So, everyone's cup will be full of joy? Not hardly. Categorically versus characteristical righteousness. I'm getting warm up to a text in 1 Corinthians 6. To understand this, we need to know a little bit about the Greek. Categorically unrighteous. Unbelievers are categorically unrighteous. They are not clothed with the righteousness of Christ. So I picture them here as a goat. Versus categorically righteous. You're a believer. You're sheep. So I put you there as blue. You have forgiveness. You have righteousness. The righteousness of Christ has been imputed to you. So you have perfect righteousness. But there's also another strata of righteousness, another stratum of righteousness. One may be characteristically unrighteous. So now we're moving from category to character. Basically, it's more than just being a saint. It's acting like a saint. It's acting saintly. So are you a saint? Yes. It doesn't matter how you live. You are a saint, categorically speaking. But how about your character? Are you saintly in your character? Maybe, maybe not. And the Christians at Corinth, they were not very saintly in their behavior. They were saints. Paul can address them as saints, but he says, hey, you're not being saintly. So in terms of your character, or characteristically, they were being unrighteous. In order to be mythologically righteous, you must obey the Lord, and if so, you will obtain, now this sheep at the top has the crown of righteousness. So if you want righteousness at this level, the top level, you must live obediently as the Lord commands. There's a correlation between the sheep and the goat. We have black sheep in the family, we have black goats. We have a goat, and I've here labeled this goat as adikoi. Adikoi is the Greek word that will be used in 1 Corinthians 6 for unrighteous. So unbelievers are unrighteous. They do not have Christ's righteousness imputed to their account. Well, there are some believers who act unrighteously. So in terms of their character, they are characteristically unrighteous, not categorically unrighteous. They are believers. They have Christ's righteousness imputed to them, but they do not have righteousness in terms of their character. So we have two possibilities. You can, at the Missiological level, you can either be an adikoi, an unrighteous sheep, or you can wear the crown of righteousness. And if so, you will be missiologically unrighteous. The sheep at that level will be adikoi, unrighteous, at the Missiological level, at the bema, at the judgment seat of Christ. Now, that's the introduction to this text. A lot of color cutting going on here. Does any of you Corinthian believers, when he has a case against his brother, dare go to law before the, I've went ahead and substituted the word categorically versus characteristically to correspond with the Greek text, which will have the article or not have the article. If it has the Greek article the or hoi, it means we're talking about categorical terms. What class I would put you in. If the article is missing, it's talking about your character. That's just a basic aspect of Greek grammar here. So, you're talking about, do you go into court before the categorically unrighteous? That is unbelievers, the hoi adikoi. And not before the hoi hagoi, the saints, the categorical saints. So we have two groups here. The unbelievers versus the believers. The categorical unrighteous versus the categorical saints. Or do you not know that the categorical saints, hoi hagioi, will judge the world? Now some people, this will not be kingdom people, but some people outside of kingdom circles have the mistaken impression that all believers are going to judge and be ruling and all this kind of stuff. No, the categorical saints does not mean all saints. It means this category. But when Paul says the unbelievers, referring to them as the categorical unrighteous, it's not talking about all lost people. All lost people are not judges. He's talking about to go into the court of law. He says, so you go before the court of law and you're going before this lost person. This lost person, Paul's referring to here as a hoi adikoi. That doesn't mean you're going before all lost people, just some of them. In the same way, just some of the saints are going to judge the world. So you got your hoi adikoi, the goats, the lost people, but not, we're talking about all the lost people. You're not going before every single lost person on the face of the planet when we go into the law, just some of them. In the same way, the hoi hagioi, the saints who are categorically saints. You're not talking about all of them, you're talking about those who qualify for ruling in the kingdom, wearing the crown of righteousness, so to speak. So let's move on beyond that level and look at sheep who act unrighteously. So verse 8, but you, Corinthian believers, behave unrighteously, adikoi, and defraud, and that your brother. In other words, the goats are hoi adikoi, and these sheep who are misbehaving are adikoi. They're simply behaving unrighteously. They're not unrighteous in terms of their category, but they're unrighteous in terms of their behavior. Do you not know that the characteristically unrighteous, adikoi, but there's no article there, there's no hoi, will not inherit the kingdom? So those believers, those saints who are acting unsaintly, will not inherit the kingdom. Do not be deceived, neither characteristic fornicators, nor idolaters, or adulterers, or effeminate, or homosexuals. Even if you're not politically correct, it's going to get you in trouble here with God. Nor thieves, nor the covetous, nor the drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. If these things characterize you, can these things characterize a believer? Yes, you can be a believer and be guilty of any one of these things. You can be practicing any one of these things. But if these things characterize you as a believer, you will not inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you. All right? Not inheriting the kingdom, that applies to the sheep. Now we're moving to such were some of you. That's going to be moving to the lost. the oikoi. And such were some of you. Some of you were the hoi oikoi. You used to be goats. But you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. The soteriological things. You're washed with regeneration, sanctified positionally, justified soteriologically, justified before God in terms of going to heaven. And in the Spirit of our God. All right, God changed your position in Christ, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your behavior improved any. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Will I then take away the members of Christ and make them members of a harlot? May it never be. In other words, don't do it. And now we're contrasting one sheep with another sheep. Yes, you are blue. In one strata, you're soteriologically washed and clean, but at the green strata, you could crawl in bed with a harlot. And if so, the one who joins himself to harlot is one body with her, for he says the two will become one flesh. But the one who joins himself to the Lord is one spirit with him. Flee immorality. Again, at the green level, what's going on right now in terms of the family fellowship. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. Glorify God in your body will be the bottom line. We need to glorify God at the green level so that we can qualify for the crown. So again, principle of correlativity. The oikoi, those who are characteristically unrighteous, will not inherit the kingdom, whether they be lost or saved. If you're acting like an unbeliever, even if you're a believer, you will not inherit the kingdom. And of course, the hoi oikoi, those who are categorically unrighteous, will not inherit the kingdom either. So again, to summarize in pictorial terms, the goats are not going to inherit the kingdom. That stands to reason. But the sheep who act like goats will not inherit the kingdom either. So can a believer act like an unbeliever? Sure. Will a believer who acts like an unbeliever inherit the kingdom? Of course not. But we're talking about being oikoi at two different planes. Soteriological plane versus Missiological plane. Again, strata. That was 1 Corinthians. Now let's move over to Revelation. Principle of correlativity as it applies to three texts in Revelation. I put a question mark beside of verse 27 because some Greek texts have the article, the hoi, and some Greek texts do not. It doesn't really matter to my argument which way you do it. I'm going to go as if it has the article. I think that's more probable. So now we're looking at the reward city. The Greek word here is pornoi, categorically immoral. Pornoi from where we get pornographic material. Hoi pornoi, it would be those who are categorically immoral. Over in Revelation, Paul's going to talk about the dogs, blah, 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 are outside of the city. So here we got the pornoi, the hoi pornoi, those who are categorically immoral, the dogs, the unregenerate, the unbelievers. They're pictured as being outside of the city in Revelation. This also has applicability to believers. Believers who act like dogs will be cast out of the side of the city. We've already seen some text indicating that. I believe John expects us to see a correlation between the two. The lost are outside the city in Revelation chapter 21, 8, 27, 22, 15. Yes, but we should see an applicability to believers as well. Some text to substantiate and illustrate what I'm talking about. In Revelation 21:8, but as for the categorically cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and fornicators, pornoi, and sorcerers and idolaters and all the categorically liars, in other words, I'm speaking categorically because it has the Greek article, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone. Okay, it makes sense. Categorically, you're an unbeliever. So, yeah, I expect you to be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. No surprise there. You're categorized as an unbeliever, so you're going to burn in the lake. Typical soteriological interpretation, and that is correct. Revelation 21:27, but nothing unclean will enter it, the city, nor the one who categorically commits abomination or falsehood, but only those whose names who are in the Lamb's book of life. So again, unbelievers will not enter the city. No surprise there. Revelation 22:15. The categorical dogs and the categorical sorcerers and the categorical fornicators, the Greek article is being used. These fornicators, pornoi, and the categorical murderers and the categorical idolaters are outside the heavenly city, and each of the ones who categorically love and practice lying. So Revelation 22:15. So for a long, long time, I was satisfied with just the typical soteriological interpretation of these passages. But I struggled, and that was a long, 2 decades ago, when I struggled with this. I was trying to figure out, are these passages talking about the lost or the saved? Some of them, it was real tempting to be saved. I finally decided, for various reasons, that the passages were talking about lost people. So for at least a decade, I guess, I was satisfied with that. But, he is saying anyone and all of those, and it just seems, I wasn't quite seeing the full picture there, but that's where I was at for quite a while. There are some corresponding Johannine promises that we see in Revelation, though. The one who categorically overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. Well, what if you're a believer and you don't overcome? Will you be hurt by the second death? For a long time, I was thinking, no, you're not hurt by the second death. Can't get this soteriological stuff. I then, for various reasons, I explained in my 2-volume book on outer darkness, came to think, well, then there is a correlation here. Blessed and holy is the one who categorically has a portion in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over such ones. In other words, if you're an overcomer, the second death has no power over you. They will be priests of Christ and will rule with him throughout the millennium. Okay. If you're an overcomer, you get to rule throughout the millennium, and then we turn over a page or two in Revelation, you get to see that extends throughout eternity. But what if you're not an overcomer? Does this second death have no applicability to you? Well, I came to decide through the principle of correlativity that John does expect us to see a correlation. It's not an identification. It's not meaning that the exact same thing is going to happen to believers. But if you're an unfaithful believer, John expects you to see that there's some similarity going on here. But Jesus did the same thing. The believers who are cast into outer darkness weep and gnash their teeth. Unbelievers who are cast into Gehenna weep and gnash their teeth. Jesus expects us to see a correlation there. John expects us to see a correlation here at 2 different strata. The hoi pornoi, those who are categorically pornoi, will burn literally in the lake of fire for eternity. No surprise there. Unbelievers are going to burn in the lake of fire for eternity. That would be, quick and easy summation from the Revelation. How about the sheep who act like that? Well, my assessment is they will be in the playpen for eternity. So just as the lost are cast into the lake of fire, the unfaithful believers will be cast into the playpen. The playpen is not the lake of fire. Lake of fire is outside of the kingdom. Playpen is inside the kingdom. So, I might allow that the playpen is in the living room. Or I might like Scott's model where the playpen's in the bedroom. But you don't take the playpen and put it outside the house in the snow. Okay. As parents, we know, you've got some options with the playpen. Taking the playpen outside the house, that's just not an option. All right. The hoi pornoi, they'll burn in the lake. The sheep, no. They're going to be confined to the playpen. The playpen is the sheep pen. So don't confuse the playpen with the lake of fire. They're not talking about the same thing. Now, I summarized with this illustration in the last presentation. I'm going to come back and revisit this. I want to go back and look at mythological death because we mythologists, we have little debates among ourselves as to just how this plays out. Here's some options for the kingdom teachers. You've seen this plenty of times, life at one level versus life at another level. Versus death, soteriological death, death in the lake of fire, burning in the lake of fire. So you can either have life at the blue level, soteriological life, life at the upper level, mythological life. This is juxtaposed with soteriological death. Some kingdom teachers do this right here. They say, yeah, you have eternal life. You could aspire to mythological life. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death, meaning you're going to have a wonderful experience of life. But if you fail to acquire that potential level of life, you're going to be cast into the lake of fire for 1,000 years. I call this the dip in the lake view. You see the dip? Everybody see the dip here, right? This is the lake of fire. You fail to get the potential here, so you take your dip in the lake. It's not a good lake to swim in. It's hot. And that's a 1,000-year dip. So it's not a minor dip. So I call that the dip in the lake view. Some of my fellow kingdom mythologists, they would say you take a dip in the lake literally for 1,000 years. I disagree. I'd say no, you cannot cross that soteriological threshold. You cannot be cast into the lake of fire. Just cannot happen. Principle of stratification is once you have acquired whatever degree of life at one strata, it cannot be thrown in reverse. You cannot go down to a lower strata. Jesus said when you're raptured, you're going to be with him forever. So with him in his kingdom somewhere, you're not going to be in the lake of fire. And then Jesus said also, I give eternal life to them and they will never perish. In other words, you're never going to be in the lake. So do I believe a believer could ever put one toe in that lake of fire? No. So do not misunderstand my particular persuasion as to what I believe the Bible's teaching as far as the lake of fire. I do not believe you can put one toe in the lake of fire. You'll never burn literally in the lake of fire or Gehenna or Hades or wherever we want to go with that discussion. So I do not hold this model. I appreciate the writings of those who do. I find them very interesting, and they have a lot of great things to say, but on this particular aspect, I disagree with them. I do believe that believers can be hurt by the second death, but not in this manner, not in this literal manner. I hold a principle of correlativity. That's how I'm going to pull it off. My model looks like this. The death that you and I experience, or not, let's say we could experience, I hope we will, none of us here will experience this. The purpose of us having this conference is so that you will not experience this type of death. But if you do not overcome as a believer, the death that you will experience will be at the mythological level, not the soteriological level. So you see the two ranges of death. I do not believe you can experience death at the lower level, only at the upper strata. So this is my model. If you fail to obtain the crown of life, you will experience a form of death, mythological death. That death happens at the upper level, not down in the lake of fire. Nevertheless, there is a correlation between the two. Just as the lost are cast into the lake of fire, so believers are cast into the playpen. And being cast into the playpen is a form of death. So I see a correlation between the two. Some would say that you're cast metaphorically into the lake of fire. Technically, I disagree. It's a minor point there. I like the principle of correlativity. John especially sees that there's a correlation. Now, let's go to my original model as I developed this in my 2-volume book on the outer darkness. At that point, I was working with this limitation. I had earth, and this was my concept of heaven. This is about, you're either here or here. You die, you go here. So that's all I had as my working model. A lot of people have that model. So if you want to see what that model will look like, well, I've got it in the 2-volume book. I've since expanded that. But this would be my original model. Here's how it worked. There's the city, off at the edge of, let's say, the edge of the universe. So at the rapture, the Lord comes. He's going to be coming in the city, brings the city with him, brings the RV with him. So here comes the Lord at the rapture, brings the city. Here we are raptured. Those on earth are caught up. I picture the bema as being up at the top. So the judgment seat's up at the top of the city. So those are on earth, they're raptured, they're called up to the bema. And those who have already died and been with the Lord, well, where were they? Well, they were in the city, because that's the only place I had to put them. That's as large as my concept of heaven was. So I had them in the lower part of the city. And I've divided up the city into 3 parts, and there's various reasons for that. So there's my picture. That was my original model. As a result of the bema, if you were found unfaithful, you would be cast out of where? Well, you couldn't be cast into outer darkness because it's not time yet. I didn't have any place to put in people in. I couldn't put people in outer darkness at this point. So I say, well, you go down to the basement. You go back down to the lower part of the city where you're probably hanging out before the bema anyway. That's the only place I had to put them in this model. And at the sheep and goat judgment, this is what you have going on. Those who were in the lower part of the city were cast down to the lower part of the earth. The sheep who were found unfaithful at the sheep and goat judgment, they were sent down to the lower part of the earth. I'm not talking about in Hades or anything. I'm talking about go down to South America or the South Pole or somewhere like that. And the faithful sheep, they go up to the city. You know, the butterfly flies up into the city, the caterpillar is cast out, that type of thing. So that was my model at that point. So I placed the outer darkness down in the lower half of Earth. So you'd be living in the southern hemisphere of Earth, and you can have night and dark down there. You know, you have your days and you have your night and dark. So there's where I placed the outer darkness, at least for the first 1,000 years. Now, as the Earth was repopulated during the millennial kingdom and then in the eternal state, Earth gets crowded. This gets to be prime real estate. So why should you let a bunch of losers, hey, if you're not an overcomer, you are a loser, you're going to lose out on rewards, etc. So why should you allow these losers live on the prime real estate? So if you're cast into the outer darkness, yeah, that's where the playpen is originally. But at in 1,000 years or a couple of thousand years or whatever, eventually the outer darkness has moved off the planet, maybe to another planet, maybe to the outer parts of this universe. So that was my original model. Playpen starts off at the lower part of the planet, but then is moved off planet at this point. And then I got with Scott. I said, Scott, I need to work on your model because there's some advantages that his model has over my model, and I was helping someone else with their model. I like competing models. It's good science to have competing models to analyze the data. So I wanted Scott to come up and explain his model now.
Are you clicking or am I clicking?
I'll click.
All right.
Because we've got a lot of movement going on.
All right, so you've got the city and then you have the courtyard. And we know the scriptures will describe for us even the temple with a courtyard around it, you know. And if you think about the temple, who went into the most holy place? How many times they go in? Once a year. Just think about what God's showing us there. Why did they only go in there once a year? I mean, that's actually in the presence of God, is it not? I mean, the Shekinah glory was in that most holy place. And as you moved away from that most holy place, you went into the holy place, right? And that's where the showbread and the candles and the priests were in there daily, were they not? And then you moved out of there. And you're outside, and you move out beyond that, and you go to the courtyard that's around that temple. And if you remember what happens between entering the temple to get there, even to go into that inner court, you got the laver. You remember, you wash your hands. So all this is signifying closeness, right? Closeness to God, intimacy with God. Going inside that most holy place was a place of intimacy with God. You're there with the creator of the universe. So that picture of the temple on earth gives us a picture of the city and how it's set up. I mean, the temple of God is going to be right here. So this model shows you a place to go on outside the city, a courtyard, a place of, you know, less intimacy. Let's call it that.
Okay. Now, so in my model, I did have the city divided up, the sanctuary, inner court, and outer court. Ezekiel's temple, and there's some other data that would suggest this. The advantage of Scott's model, he has the courtyard outside. So when people die, when believers die, right now, they would be living in the courtyard in Scott's model. In my model, they'd be in the city. In Scott's model, they're outside the city. Everybody kind of with us there, because I like looking at two different models, and I'm going to combine these in a little while.
So this goes into, okay, when I die, where do I go?
Right.
If I died right now, would I be in the New Jerusalem, seated right beside Jesus? I just don't think I would. I think I'd be in his presence. I think I'd be close in this courtyard, but the culmination of things are coming. And this intimacy that we're going to be able to share with the Lord is coming. It's not all come to fruition just yet. And that's why, in my mind, there's a holding place. We're with the Lord. To be present, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But exactly where that is, it makes sense to me, this configuration.
Right. And I like how Scott would sometimes put it. They're in the courtyard. They're not going to dirty the sheets before, we're out there. Everybody's outside. So this is how his model would work. My model had everybody in the city. His model had everybody outside the city right now. So let's put his in outer space. So there's his model. The difference here is he has a courtyard outside the city. I did not have that in my model. Rapture comes. Bring the city and courtyard. Rapture, everybody's caught up.
So what are we caught up to? We're caught up to be judged, are we not?
Beauty of his model. He could have someone cast in outer darkness immediately as a result of Bema. I didn't have that possibility in my model. So Bema occurs, you're found unfaithful, you could be cast in outer darkness right then. I do not have this possibility in my model. There are some people out there, experts, mythologists, who believe the outer darkness is part of the New Jerusalem. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I like Scott's model a lot better than that model.
Let's make a comment also on the outer darkness, the idea of it. What's going to characterize the city? Darkness or light? Light. Light. I mean, the Shekinah glory of God will flow forth from that city. To be cast in the outer darkness, it's a relative darkness. It's not that there's no light there. It's outside the splendor of the city. And the imagery given is that banquet hall. Someone's kicked out of the banquet hall. They're outside, kind of in the dark. All those lights and the festivities are going on inside the banquet hall, and they're on the outside looking in, not on the inside where all the festivities are going on, and the light is very bright. So the idea of outer darkness is not like total darkness. That's not it at all. It's not like you can't see anything. In fact, you can see things. You're on the outside looking in. That's the picture that Jesus paints for us of the outer darkness.
And we hypothesize that in Scott's model, they could be outside. Right now, they could be outside in the courtyard seeing the construction going on in New Jerusalem. So it's not like you're out in pitch black darkness. They're just going back to the place they were before the rapture occurred. It's not like it's that horrible or anything like that. It's where we would be right now if we were to die right now in his model. Then we have this event at the sheep and goats judgment. So, at sheep and goats judgment, faithful sheep, they're called up, they're going to live in the city. The unfaithful sheep cast down to the outer darkness. The outer darkness is there, off planet. He has the outer darkness off planet immediately. For me, I would probably postpone it for 1,000 years or so until the planet gets fully populated. So it's a little difference in our models there. That's where I was at. I guess maybe 2 years ago, we were working on that model because we were helping another kingdom teacher work on his model for the outer darkness. And that's where we were at then. Since that point, I've given some further thought to this, and I think there's a way to vamp up both of our models. First heaven, second heaven, third heaven. When I look at what Paul is saying there, I believe that my understanding of heaven was too limited. And Scott expanded a little bit, but I think even his courtyard motif was much too limited as well. First heaven would be right, our atmosphere, where the birds fly, that type of thing. The second heaven would be the universe, that we're at the center of the universe, and there's the universe. The third heaven would be the heavenly realm. Not just the city, not just the city, but the courtyard, but a whole realm encircling our reality. And I'll use a few object lessons to help illustrate this. This is not to scale, not even close to scale. But think of this as being our universe, kind of silvery with the stars and all that kind of thing. And there's Earth, center of our universe. Again, redshift would indicate this. It would be best to picture our Earth as at the center or approximate center of the universe. Stars expanded out from our Earth in uniformity all around. And the young Earth creationist model I like says that the universe is spherical. So everything expanded out from Earth, uniform, and created a sphere. And so that is the young Earth model that I like. Nowadays, I've gone beyond that to say this is heaven. Heaven is, vast. Yeah, there's a city. Now, there is this thing right here is the lake of fire. I'm just illustrating this. If you were to open up heaven, it's be kind of like open up a universe inside. Yeah! We're about to be in outer darkness. There went the lake of fire. It's bouncing off. All right. Now, so inside you have, all right, let's go with this side here. There's Earth in the center of our universe. And our universe is inside of heaven. So that's kind of what it looked like. And there's the heavenly city up there. Now, there's our universe. In multiverse theory, you have multiple. Multiverse is where you have multiple universes. Quantum physics, you have multiple dimensions and that type of thing. So you have our four-dimensional space, time, universe suspended in here in hyperspace, and we might have 10, 11 dimensions. And we only see 4 of our dimensions that we can experience in the space-time quantum. So you have multiple universes. If this is not how it is right now, this surely is how it will have to be eventually. Humanity will spread and continue to grow for eternity. Generations will continue for eternity. The Old Testament, and I have a chapter or something like that in Outer Darkness, I show that human population continues to decrease for eternity. That means you have infinite growth. The universe is not infinite. Our universe is finite. So if you have an infinite growth, and it gets to be exponential, that infinite growth cannot be contained by a finite universe. So eventually, the human population must expand beyond our present universe. Now, I know some popular authors that suggest, well, maybe God just increases the size of our universe. Well, looking at quantum physics, it's a whole lot easier just to postulate that, hey, he creates another universe. And you just go through hyperspace and go over to the other universe. So in multiverse theory, there are multiple universes. So if we're not there yet, and I'd be surprised if we're not, we will be. This is a mathematical necessity as I look at what the Bible teaches about eternal rewards. But I believe we're there now. I believe God has already created multiple universes. And our universe, hey, let's stop, probably in the center. I mean, our planet is in the center of our universe, Hubble Space Telescope. So it makes sense to me that our universe was probably in the center of the multiverse. Get my lake of fire up here before I step on and get burned. So that would be where I'm at currently, and I've got some material that I've written on that, and after the conference I'll get back to finishing that up. So to move quickly through this, because I've shown you this, our Earth is in the center of our universe. Heaven, very, very big place. Heavenly city, lake of fire. Our universe and Earth inside of heaven. So see that there, explain that. Multiverse, multiple universes inside of heaven. Now, I'm going to get more graphical with computer representation here. So here we have heaven, the heavenly realm, all that outside there. forming a great big hollow sphere, and it's thick. I mean, I showed city thick. It's probably more like as thick as a universe, or that's just how I would picture it anyway. So this is a massive heavenly realm. The multiverse is inside. There's who knows how many universes are inside of the heavenly realm. Maybe thousands, millions, billions, trillions, zillions. And, I figure that these things can expand. God can create more and expand the range of heaven. No problem, should that need arise. It would take a long time for him to have to do that. Let's say there's a billion universes there. But that's where I would speculate is the situation now. Lake of fire, I picture as being outside of the heavenly realm. If you're in a lake of fire, you're outside of the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven covers a whole lot of territory. But if you're in a lake of fire, you're outside of the kingdom. Heavenly city and courtyard. This is the revised Crawfordian model. So this is revised Scott's model in relation to what I've done here. The heavenly city and courtyard are in the heavenly realm. They do not comprise all the whole heavenly realm. It's just a small, small, small part of the heavenly realm, or of heaven. So we have Scott's model here with the courtyard there. City comes down to earth, and the people are cast in outer darkness originally. So I hope you can recall the difference there. I'm picturing the city, not the courtyard coming down. In his model, I was picturing city and courtyard coming. In this model, I'm thinking probably more likely everybody's called up to the bema at the top of the city comes down to earth, the bema occurs, and if you've been found unfaithful, you're cast into the outer darkness, which is back at the original position where you're at. That's why I was saying his model is kind of like you got the playpen in the bedroom. Now, the living room where Diane and I put Jeremy, we lived in the living room. That's where we spent most of our time. And so it's kind of like you have real close proximity to your children in the living room, but you put them off in the bedroom, like you got some of those beds that you raise them up and they hope they don't crawl over and jump out of the thing, that type of thing. Well, it would be more like that. So I picture Scott's models like that. The playpen is way off in a remote section of the bedroom, but it's still the kingdom of heaven. You're still with Jesus in his kingdom. Here's my revised model. I do not have a courtyard. So, city comes down to earth. Outer darkness is out part of earth, and then in the outer part of the universe. Guess what? As I've told Scott a number of things, the possibility is that we could both be right. So here is the combined new model where it combines both of our models. We have a courtyard. In this combined model, in my model, I had everybody living in the city. Well, let's say I'm wrong. I could be wrong here. Maybe only the faithful live in the heavenly city currently. And maybe the unfaithful live in the courtyard currently. So we're taking half his model, half my model, and saying some are in one place, some are in the other. It's not an all or nothing. If that model proves to be correct, then I would speculate that when the city comes down, the outer darkness will be back in the heavenly realm. The outer darkness is the outer realm. Three competing models. I do not know which model is correct. I could be wrong in holding my model. So, some places I can see where I could be wrong. Because this is a good competing model. Scott's model is a very good competing model. And there's also a possibility that we could both be right, or half right, however you want to look at it. So right now what I'm researching is near-death experiences and visions of people who are claiming to have died and gone to heaven. The reason I'm going there, I cannot determine from the biblical data which of these three models are correct. So I thought, okay, I'll finally break in. This movie came out, Heaven is Real was the name of that movie, wasn't it? So I thought, okay, I'll go to that movie, I'll get the literature, and I've read half a stack of books now, and I've got another half a stack to read. And there's reasons for me to like all three models. I do not know which model is correct. So the question is not if there's a playpen, it's just a question of where is the playpen? And when are the Christians put in the playpen? So we both agree that outer darkness refers to exclusion from the city. It's just we have competing ideas as to where exactly that exclusion will be.